news tonight, His Majesty the King holds talks with Canadian leaders at the start of an official visit to Ottawa. A new power plant is inaugurated in East Amman that will supply the kingdom with 15% of its electricity needs. And Saudi Arabia's King Salman appoints Interior Minister Mohammed bin Nayef as his new heir and names his son Defense Minister Mohammed bin Salman second in line in a dramatic reshuffle. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. His Majesty the King today begins an official visit to Ottawa for talks with Governor-General of Canada, David Johnston, Prime Minister Stephen Harper and other senior officials. The talks will deal with prospects of boosting Jordanian-Canadian ties in economic and other fields, as well as political developments in the Middle East and the world. The King's trip comes at a time when the two countries' trade and economic relations have substantially grown after a bilateral free trade agreement came into effect in late 2012. Jordan and Canada have signed other agreements in the investment, labor and environment sectors. A major power generation plant has become operational in East Amman. The Al Manakhir power station, which was constructed by the Amman Asia Electric Power Company, will provide about 15% of the power supply to the current capacity of the electric network. Deputizing for His Majesty the King, Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour inaugurated the new plant. He said the project is part of the kingdom's effort to achieve sustainable economic growth, boost energy security and develop the energy sector infrastructure. He said the project is a key element in the national energy strategy, which aims at meeting a growing demand for electricity and increasing electricity power capacity. The venture prepares and expands the national electrical grid for additional loads in the future. Mansour said the opening of the plant is a milestone in Jordan's drive to achieve energy security and sends a message to partners in the national development effort that the government is capable of accomplishing its energy goals. The 573 megawatt station is the largest diesel-fired power generation project in the world and was recorded in the Guinness Book of Records. Saudi King Salman appointed Interior Minister Mohammed bin Nayef as his new heir in a dramatic reshuffle in the kingdom. The monarch also made his son, Defense Minister Mohammed bin Salman, second in line to succeed. By making Mohammed bin Nayef 55 Crown Prince and Mohammed bin Salman, who is in his early 30s, Deputy Crown Prince, the Saudi monarch has set the kingdom's succession for decades. He also replaced veteran Foreign Minister Prince Saud Al Faisal, who has served in the role since October 1975. Saudi ambassador in Washington, Adel Al-Jubeir, is the first non-royal to hold the post of Foreign Minister. In a decree published by state media, King Salman said the decision to replace Prince Migrin with Mohammed bin Nayef as his heir and to make his son Deputy Crown Prince had been approved by a majority of the family's Allegiance Council. The decree also appointed Saudi Aramco Chief Executive Khalid Al-Faleh and as Health Minister and Chairman of Aramco, and made Labour Minister Adel Al-Fakih Economic and Planning Minister, replacing him with Mufrij Al-Haqbani. The charges came at a moment of unprecedented regional turmoil, with Saudi Arabia launching a military campaign in Yemen. Saudi-led airstrikes hit 5 Yemeni provinces as fighting raged in the southern city of Aden. Sources in the region said the kingdom was training armed tribesmen to fight the Iran-allied Houthi group. Here's more.
The war against Yemen's Houthi militants and their allies continues with airstrikes across the country. The Saudi-led airstrikes hit several Yemeni provinces, including the capital Sana'a. This is the aftermath of a Saudi-led strike that yesterday targeted the city's airport's runway to stop an Iranian flight landing there, leaving its main runway in a shambles. The move could hamper the delivery of much-needed humanitarian assistance in the impoverished nation. The southern city of Aden also had its share of the airstrikes, which coincided with heavy clashes between Houthi militias and their allies and troops loyal to Yemeni President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi in the city's Khor Maksar district. According to residents, Houthi rebels' tanks and snipers killed at least 12 civilians overnight in the southern city as the Saudi-led coalition airdropped arms to anti-Houthi fighters in the city of Taiz. The weeks-long Saudi-led air campaign has left residents of Aden facing food and fuel shortages. Hundreds of air raids and dozens of ground battles across Yemen have left millions in the impoverished country hungry and 150,000 fleeing for their lives. This is an Aden bakery where people lined up to get bread. This Aden resident says, "We are suffering from a shortages of cooking gas, fuel and wheat, but also lack of electricity. We ask the government and the President Abdrabbu Mansour Hadi to rescue the poor people." But despite the dire humanitarian conditions, some residents remain defiant. This man says, "We cannot allow Houthis or Ali Abdullah Saleh to play with the people of the south. We will resist and we will endure." The war has also taken its toll on civilians in Taiz. The streets are almost empty of cars. Cars with water tanks could be seen supplying water to residents for a fee. Behind the struggle for the country's future, average Yemenis bear the brunt of fighting. The United Nations says 12 million people are food insecure or going hungry. Rad Laptouche for the news at 10.
The White House said it was concerned about the impact on navigation caused by Iran's seizure of a container ship in the Strait of Hormuz and said it was monitoring the situation. White House spokesman John Earnest said no injuries has been reported from the Maersk Tigris and that the ship remained in the custody of Iran as of this morning. The boarding of the ship has prompted the United States to send military vessels to monitor the situation. Iran's foreign minister told an audience in New York City that Tehran respects freedom of navigation in the Gulf. The U.S.-led coalition conducted a total of 20 airstrikes against Daesh militants in Syria and Iraq since last Monday. The U.S. military said in a statement that 16 airstrikes were carried out in Iraq near the cities of Hawija, Biji, Fallujah, Ramadi and Sinjar, in addition to Tal Afar. The statement added that other airstrikes were staged in Syria around the cities of Kobani and Al-Hasaka. In the ongoing civil war in Syria, a small girl was among 4 civilians killed in the rebel-held neighborhood of Firdos, south of the Aleppo city. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights said another 7 civilians died in Deir Hafir and Bab, 2 areas located in the east and north of Aleppo under the control of Daesh. 69 suspected Muslim Brotherhood supporters were each sentenced to 25 years in prison in Egypt. All the defendants were convicted on charges that included deliberately setting fire to a church and looting it. The convicts were also fined almost $3,000 each. Another 2 juveniles were sentenced to 10 years in jail each without parole. Egyptian authorities have jailed thousands of suspected members of Muslim Brotherhood, and the courts have sentenced hundreds to death. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has identified Muslim Brotherhood as a threat to national security. Back here at home, His Royal Highness Prince Faisal bin Al-Hussein, the regent, received the head of the Foreign Affairs Committee from the Japanese ruling Liberal Democratic Party and members of the Japanese House of Representatives, Kenya Akiba. During the royal court meeting, the regent stressed Jordan's keenness to forge closer ties and friendship with Japan. He noted the advanced levels relations had reached in light of the agreement and memorandums of understanding that bound the 2 countries in various sectors. The Japanese official commended Jordan's efforts to enhance world peace and security. Nepali villagers blocked trucks carrying supplies for earthquake victims, demanding the government to do more to help after last week's disaster. The earthquake left more than 5,000 people dead and 10,000 injured, while tens of thousands of people are also homeless and short of food and water. In the capital, Kathmandu, people protested outside Parliament, asking for more buses to go to their homes in remote parts of the Himalayan nation. The protesters called on authorities to hasten the distribution of aid that has flooded into the country but has been slow to reach those in need. Here's more.
Nepal's Prime Minister Sushil Koirala has been visiting the injured after Saturday's earthquake, but his popularity is lower than ever. He's being blamed for the government's perceived weak response to the crisis.
But he come just looking and run away because we are looking for talk to something for him. He didn't give us face and he's run away. He's not good. He didn't like the Nepali people like this Prime Minister. We need to change right now, Prime Minister. We need to kick out from.
And the anger is growing. With more than 5,000 now known to have died, survivors like those in this village on the outskirts of the capital Kathmandu are doing what they can without any government help.
We want the government and the political parties to get together to provide us help. There's so much help coming from outside, they shouldn't hoard that, they should give it to us.
But as each day passes, life after the 7.8 magnitude earthquake worsens. And the death toll is likely to climb as well. With information yet to come in from many rural areas, officials say the final number could be as many as 10,000.
Mountaineers who were on expedition in Nepal when the weekend's massive earthquake struck recounted their experience after authorities airlifted them to the capital, Kathmandu. The devastating earthquake triggered a deadly avalanche on the world's highest mountain, Mount Everest, claiming 18 lives. Hundreds others are still feared stranded. One mountaineer recalled how the ground beneath him shook when he began the trek towards Everest Base Camp. Another said a helicopter rescued her along with other trekkers. A U.S. national said mountaineers from around 9 countries had come for trekking in the mountains. U.S. Attorney General Loretta Lynch said she has directed the Justice Department to provide assistance to the Maryland city of Baltimore in addressing recent turmoil that earlier this week turned into riots. Baltimore remained on edge. Police in riot gear deployed near the site of a wave of rioting as citizens expressed anger over the death of a black man after his arrest by police. The city had less violence last night, the first day a new overnight curfew took effect following Monday's rioting, which saw buildings and cars burned as looters clashed with police. Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe expressed deep repentance over Japan's role in World War II. Speaking in Washington before U.S. Congress, Abe spoke of his deeply symbolic visit to Washington's World War II memorial. He insisted that Japan must not avert its eyes from the suffering of Asian people from its wartime behavior. Abe's speech to Congress was a moment deeply symbolic of the reconciliation between former World War II enemies who are now the closest of allies. While many visit hair salons to get rid of their gray hairs, now young women are paying big bucks to have their gray put in. Inspired by celebrities such as Lady Gaga and Pink, the look called granny hair has picked up momentum over the past few years and is now the latest fashion. It has its own hashtag on Twitter, and every day people around the world post pictures of their latest gray look. But getting granny hair isn't cheap. It costs about $700 to go gray, and that's just the start. To maintain your granny hair, the look needs to be touched up every 4 weeks to ensure you don't have any gray hairs creeping through. A team of trekkers have arrived at the North Pole after walking across 160 kilometers of sea ice as they tried to set an unusual world record. Former England Rugby 7 captain Oli Phillips and former England fullback Tim Simpson will captain two teams who will play the first ever Rugby 7 match at the North Pole. The record attempt is all in aid of the Wooden Spoon charity, and they hope to raise £300,000. The challengers flew from Resolute Bay in Canada before walking the 160 kilometers to play the 7-a-side match in the frozen conditions. The team were expected to play the Rugby 7 match today. And finally, a look at the weather. Mild tonight in most areas with northwesterly fresh winds. Tomorrow, a tangible drop in temperature will create fair weather in the hilly areas and relatively hot elsewhere in the country. Aqaba should expect a hot day with northerly moderate winds and calm seas. Next are the lows and highs for tonight and tomorrow. And to end the news, here's a recap of our top stories. His Majesty the King holds talks with the Canadian leaders at the start of an official visit to Ottawa. A new power plant is inaugurated in East Amman that will supply the kingdom with 15% of its electricity needs. And Saudi Arabia's King Salman appoints Interior Minister Mohammed bin Nayef as his new heir and names his son, Defense Minister Mohammed bin Salman, second in line in a dramatic reshuffle. And with this we come to an end. I'm Farah Ajlouni. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.